So if you're like me, you've probably heard a lot of opinions about the COVID vaccine. Everything from I can't wait to get it to there is no way anyone could make me get it. I'm going to talk to you about my story and why I made the decision I did right now. So I'm Dr. Scott Bland. I am a family physician. My goal is to help you make informed decisions so that you can come up with the decision and the action that really lines up with your priorities and your values. Today we're talking about the COVID vaccine, why I made the decision to get it, and hopefully it will help you understand a little bit about my thought process and maybe give you some information that will be useful to you as you make your own decisions. So I have a lot of friends and family who are very skeptical about the notion of taking the coronavirus vaccine. So if that is where you're at personally, please understand I still like you. We can still be friends. It's okay. I'm not here to beat on you. I am trying to share my thought process and share some of the decisions that I went through. I will admit that when I first heard there was going to be a vaccine out that fast and that there was going to be a new mechanism, I was a little bit skeptical. I am a cynical person by nature, and I was not immediately optimistic that I was going to get it. And then at residency, we were going through the actual study results. I finally got to read the information that had come out in New England Journal of Medicine. I actually started reading up on the emergency use authorization process and how that went. I got a lot more informed than I was, and it changed my mind. Even though I was a doctor, I really didn't understand the emergency use authorization process at that time, what the criteria were, and until I actually went and read the New England Journal of Medicine, the studies that came out, and I'll link all those below, I didn't understand how effective this vaccine probably is, right? So I actually have a whole video where I talk through the actual data if you want to see that, and I'll link the actual studies themselves so you can read them. I don't actually think you should trust everybody's word for stuff. I do think it's important for you to learn on your own, so please do that. But when I looked through it and I looked at my risk factors being a doctor who treats COVID patients and how effective I thought this vaccine was, to me, it seemed like a no-brainer. It seemed to me like it was a very clear win. So one of the reasons I got the COVID vaccine was just straight up for me. I am in my 40s. I am not a 19-year-old Olympian. I have some risk factors of my own, and certainly risk factors for exposure, being in a hospital all the time. And it made sense for me to do that and for me to get the vaccine. The other reason that I did it is I had to think about my own family. So I have family at home, and again, none of us are 19-year-old Olympians, so I had to think about the risk that I am bringing home to them when I come home from a hospital every day. I want to be very clear that the COVID vaccine studies that I've talked about in my other video, the initial Pfizer and Moderna studies, those did not track transmissibility, but they did show a large, huge short-term decrease in symptomatic COVID in folks who had been vaccinated. So in my mind, it certainly was logical that there might be less of a transmission risk, although it wasn't proven out of that study because it wasn't a thing they tracked for. If I'm going to be so much less likely to have enough of a COVID infection after being vaccinated that I even have any symptoms, in my mind, there was a real decent chance that I'd be less likely to transmit it to my family, and I would certainly be less likely to end up in the hospital missing out on work, missing out on caring for my patients, and to be frank, a much probably lower, less chance that I'm going to die at that point. And I'm still young enough that I want to put a bunch of years in, so that was another issue. It was how am I going to take care of my family, reduce my risk of exposure to them, as well as increase the odds that I'm going to be around long term to be able to take care of them. I think that this is also an important time to talk about another myth that I've heard from a number of people about the coronavirus vaccine. There are still people who think that children cannot get the coronavirus. I can't explain to you enough how untrue that is. It is statistically real that children are less likely to have a death related to the coronavirus. They're less likely to end up in the hospital with it. They tend to do better than older folks with lung problems and diabetes and blood pressure. But children can absolutely get the coronavirus. And again, while it is less likely, they can absolutely be hurt significantly, end up in the ICU, and be killed by the coronavirus. This is a thing that really does hurt them too. A lot less likely, but frankly, if it's your kid, the statistic of it being less likely becomes somewhat irrelevant because you're worried about them and their health. I think that the other reason I had to really consider getting the coronavirus vaccine, even if I thought my risk itself wasn't that great, and even if I didn't think a risk of transmitting to my family was that great because we're all generally healthy, I had to think about my patients. So I see a lot of people who are in the really high risk categories. I have patients who are on cancer treatments and are immunosuppressed. I have patients who have very significant lung problems and have oxygen requirement on a regular basis. People who have diabetes and high blood pressure and heart problems, and those folks are really at risk. And so when I looked at it, I had to say to myself, I'm going to be walking in and out of these people's rooms. And it is important to me to try and protect my patients, as well as protect my own family, as well as protect myself. So when I sat down and looked through all of that, it really seemed like an important decision for me to get the coronavirus vaccine. There was also the fact that if I could explain to someone how I thought it made sense, and despite the fact that the mRNA technology is a reasonably new method, it's been studied for over 10 years now at this point, so it's not quite as new as everyone tries to make it sound. I understand that it is a situation that makes some folks nervous. You can't watch the news without being aware of that, but it made a lot of sense to me that I should go ahead and take this vaccine and express in a very palpable way that I believe that it is generally safe and I believe that it is generally effective. So I can look at my patients who are nervous about this and I can say to them, hey, your own doctor got this. Here's a picture of me getting my vaccine. I really think this is something that can help you out. And I understand that you're nervous, but please understand, I thought this was safe enough to do to myself. I thought this was safe enough to suggest to my wife when she gets eligible in the pass out of all of the vaccines. And were my children old enough, I would be suggesting it to them. I suggested it to my mom and my dad. I do believe that based on the limited data that we have right now, this vaccine is a really, really good chance to reduce our risk and to increase our odds of getting through this pandemic. Hopefully we'll have more information in the future. Maybe we'll even have better vaccines in the future, but this is what we have now. And I hope that helps you understand a little bit about why a doctor chose to get the COVID vaccine and why it's something that you should discuss with your doctor too. And it's something that you really should consider because I think that it is likely to be a good benefit to you.